So, in the first two novels of the Lewis trilogy, we saw Inspector Finn going back to his origin without leaving his profession for real. What's next for him in this last book?
Finn has come back to the island to restore his parents' home, which is in ruins now, the place where he grew up as a child. But because he has quit the police force, he needs to get a job, so he applies for and gets a job on an estate, a hunting, shooting, fishing estate on the island that is bedeviled by poachers. So he's in charge of security and trying to catch the poachers. So that's where he is at this point when we start the third book in the trilogy.
So he never really leaves his job?
Well, he specialises in security, yes. So I guess it's kind of police work, but not official.
The kind of expository writing you use describe in detail the Outer Hebrides landscape. Why do you have this attention for detail?
I think it's very important for the reader to go on the journey with the writer. Personally, if I'm reading a book, I like to have a sense of place, to feel that I'm in the place where the action is taking part. And so when I'm writing, I like to create that sense of place for the reader as well, so that they can feel the wind and the rain and hear the crashing of the waves on the beach and really feel that they're part of the story. I think it brings it to life more.
How did you develop your passion for writing?
Well, I wrote my first book when I was 4 years old. It's only about 6 pages long, and the letters are about that size, about 4 or 5 words per page. My parents taught me to read and write before I started school, so the very first thing I did, given that rudimentary skill, was to write a story. So writing was in my DNA, I guess. But the problem is that it's very hard to make a living as a writer. And so when it came to making career choices when I left school, I decided to become a journalist because that was the nearest I could get to making a living as a writer. And it is writing of a kind, but it's not the kind I wanted to do. But from journalism, I developed my skills as a researcher, my skills as a writer, and I got my first book published when I was working as a journalist. And it was about a journalist, an investigative journalist. And that book was adapted for television, and that changed my career path. I moved then from journalism into television. I became a scriptwriter, screenwriter, and latterly a producer. So I was nearly 20 years in television before I quit the world of TV to pursue my first love, which was writing books. And so I quit television in 1996. So I've had nearly 20 years now trying to make a living as a writer of books, nothing else, a writer of books. And so it's been a bumpy ride, but in the end success came, and very pleased with that.
It seems your relationship with fans is great, but what about literary criticism? Do you ever worry about public opinion, and how does this affect your work?
Well, I think no writer likes to be criticised. I think that's a given. But of course, if you write for public consumption, you write books that are being sold in the shops and on the internet, then inevitably people are going to write critiques of your work, and not all of them will be good, because not everybody will like what you write. But and I think at first it's quite hard to deal with criticism, but after a while, when you come to realise that the vast majority of the critics and your readers like your work and say nice things about your work, then it's easier to dismiss those few people who don't like your work. So I ignore them now.
Let's talk about what you're doing now. Can you tell me about your future project, particularly about the adventure of Inspector Finn? Will we have the pleasure to read about him again?
Finn is finished. It's just a trilogy, so it's only 3 books. So in the final book, we leave Finn to get on with his life, because we've examined his life in quite some detail, and it's it's difficult to keep pursuing the life of a character that you've already explored in so much detail in the way that I have with Finn. So I wanted to go on and write other things. And the first thing I wrote after the trilogy was a book called Entry Island, which is set partially in the Hebrides, but 150 years ago, and partially in contemporary Quebec in Canada. Yeah. And that was a big success, and it won some major prizes in the UK last year. And I moved on from that to write something completely different, a book called Runaway, which has a largely biographical basis. Is that when I was a teenager, I ran away from home with a group of boys that I played with in a band. We left Glasgow, we went to London, we lived rough in the streets and tried to make our fame and fortune that way, but of course failed. And that became the inspiration for the book Runaway, which is my current book out in the UK just now, and it's been very successful. But I've just finished writing a new book, which is called Coffin Road. I returned to the Hebrides for that. It's set on the Isle of Lewis, and it's a contemporary eco-thriller. Everybody who's read it so far is very excited about it. It comes out in the UK next January, and I think it might be the best thing I've written yet.
Okay, so are there things you want to do right now?
Oh, I'm working on a number of other things. There's a project involving a major Hollywood producer who wants to take my China series of books and turn them into a movie franchise. And he's in the middle of discussing that with several large Chinese production companies. I'm also working on a stage musical with a rock star from the 80s and 90s. I can't say who just at the moment, but that is coming quite close to fruition, and that's a very exciting project.
So we're going to see more of your work?
I think it'll be a while before you get rid of me yet.
Thank you.
Very welcome.